year Black Ops 4 was revealed to the entire world, multiplayer, zombies, battle royale, and all. Everything we're going to be getting within the game this October was revealed to us, obviously not in a full capacity, but in a sense that we want to come back for more, hopefully want to come back for more. And so with that, we ended up seeing all kinds of gameplay, including multiplayer gameplay, which we're going to be having here on the channel and up on the channel for quite some time, so stick it right here for that stuff. Zombies trailers and then battle royale teasers as well, so that kind of stuff is there. But when we talk about multiplayer gameplay in particular, that's something that a lot of people may be skeptical or up in the air on, because there is a lot to talk about that changed within the game. And I'm gonna be totally honest with you, the Call of Duty that we know, so much has changed within Black Ops 4, but it is something that it will grow on you. It is something that I hope you hold out a little bit of your judgment until you have a little bit more of an understanding how the systems in place work, a little bit of a hands-on experience for yourself, and all that kind of stuff, because admittedly, I still don't even know that much about the game, and I played it for a little bit. So we're gonna be learning as a community together quite a bit over the next couple of months, but I wanna give you guys today in this video 17 of the biggest changes from the current Call of Duty systems that you may know, that you may think you know, and all that going forward. So these things you will see right now in Black Ops 4 if you were to go to the reveal event and actually play the build that we played. Some of this stuff may be subject to change in the future, but as it stands right now, this is what we got on the table to look forward to. So I want to let you guys know about everything you need to know that is a little bit different. So let's jump right into it. Firstly, let's start out with the stuff that's actually probably the biggest changes here out of this you'll notice immediately every single time you play the game. That firstly being the health overall is no longer 100 HP as we've seen as the standard for quite some time, since the beginning of the franchise even, but this now in fact brings it up to 150 HP standard, not 100, which again is a major change up and a major curveball. Now this of course will increase the time to kill that it takes for you to end up getting those kills, to end up taking down your opponent, but that was something that is of course a major and big change that right off the bat you will 100% notice. Now the next thing is health regeneration itself. This was a massive one again, that even from the rumors that came out a little bit earlier, people were like, wait a second, is this for real? So it actually is. Health regeneration is no longer automatic, as we've once again seen for the entirety of the franchise. That is something that's going to be completely taken out in Black Ops 4's multiplayer. That's something that you have to consciously do it yourself with the L1 button. And there are ways that you can speed it up, but we'll get to that in a second. But that was something that, again, it takes a little bit to completely bring that into your mind that you have to do it. But after you play a couple of games, it does become automatic. It becomes a second nature, if you will. And that's something that, again, I caught on very quickly, but it might take some people a little bit more time, but it is something that is changing out with Black Ops 4 itself. Another big one is the fact there is actually no kills within Black Ops 4. Of course, yes, you do get the actual kills, you do take down an enemy, but you don't get credited for kills. Instead, it's all damage dealt, which is a massive change up, and one that honestly, in the sense of something that's been age-old in Call of Duty, pub stomping, that'll be really interesting to see how that actually shakes down, because again, there's nothing that really indicates your kills, it's all straight up damage dealt. So that's something that will be a massive player in the way of how the meta of the game perhaps even plays, but you end up getting a different focus on that in the gameplay itself. But there are things that, like assist, it counts as kills now, which will be also very interesting on how that works out. There's a lot of stuff here changed up with that in particular. We might break down in a deeper video, but we'll talk about this at a more top-down level for this one. The next thing actually deals at a little bit more of a grand scale for how the gameplay itself works out within Black Ops 4, that dealing with the specialists. Now for this, Black Ops 4 isn't introducing specialists for the first time. We saw specialists obviously within Black Ops 3, but the system in which they are in place right now is different than that of what was in Black Ops 3. For the specialists in Black Ops 4, you can only have one of each per match on a team. So we had in total available to us to play at this reveal 8 total. We had Battery, Ajax, Torque, Firebreak, Crash, Recon, Ruin, and Seraph. But you gotta be fast, and unfortunately, I didn't get enough time to play with each and every specialist, but the ones that I did, well, we'll get to that in probably a later video, or a little bit in this video a little bit later on. But it is nearly a competitive match selection setup. Think Rainbow Six Siege in this sense, but then from there you can go on and pick your class, all that kind of stuff. Initially, it almost felt like you could only have one class per game, but then I realized that I'm a total idiot and just missed the blatantly obvious change class icon. But another thing that I want to mention with specialists is that you can change specialists mid-game, but only if no one else is using it. So it kind of takes that system that was in place from Infinite Warfare, where you could change out your rig in the middle of the game, but instead of having crossovers, you have to choose from what is available from that specialist pool that is not being currently used. So it's very interesting on how this will work out, but that's a big one nonetheless. Another big thing was that of a new selection in the creative class itself. We have something called gear, which to me is sort of a crutch thing in the creative class, because to me, there are two in particular that really stand out. There are 5 total off the top of my head if I'm not mistaken, and they are all great obviously in their own different ways, but there are 2 that really stand out, that being the stim shot and the body armor. Because the stim shot, like we talked about, health regeneration is manual, you have to do it yourself, and without stim shot, you end up having a gradual regeneration of health. It's not something that's automatic and instantaneous, but with stim shot, all you have to do is hit left 1, and after a certain point, obviously there is a cooldown with this, it instantly regens you back up to 150 health. So you could be at 2 HP and go in a split second to 150, finish off a gunfight, and something similar in that scenario where it's just instantaneous. That's one that is obviously very crutch. It was absolutely massive in gunfights, but then another big one is body armor, because this is something that does not increase your health, but instead takes the amount of damage that a bullet would normally do to you in those first initial shots, and it decreases that, so you don't lose as much HP right off the first initial shots. So it's almost a faux way of giving you extra health. But those are 2 major ones that really are going to be very crutch in the way that the gear system itself works. Other things there are things like the ComSec device, which is your equivalent to hardline, but going up against the other 2, well, it's still no bueno. Another new thing in the creative class itself is the special issue, and this is things alongside your gameplay like grenades that will help you out. But the huge thing is that in this game, you can only take 1 lethal or tactical, since the L1 position is used for your regen, or in the case of stim shot, that instantaneous regen. So you're only limited to 1 slot of either of those. So that's very limiting in that aspect. You can't have both, you can only have 1 or, and so from there, I guess that kind of depicts a little bit of the gameplay moving forward. But one thing that I think that I noticed, and forgive me if I'm wrong or mistaken on this one, but if you don't use it, it's defaulted to another specialist item. But again, I could be wrong on that. That's what it just seemed like from the gameplay that I remember capturing, and then looking back on it a little bit, I couldn't exactly pinpoint where everything else was from. But nonetheless, other things like that are your trophy system, Molotov, frag, concussion, or your combat axe as well. So a lot of options there, but even still, this is just an early build, so even more will be in that full launch. Talking creative class changes though, one thing that was actually pretty big is there's a rifle split in the classifications. We no longer have just what we know of assault rifles, submachine guns, light machine guns, sniper rifles, and then into the secondaries, we have all of those now: assault rifles, submachine guns, light machine guns, and sniper rifles, and then a new type called the tactical rifles. Personally, I didn't use these. You may see some footage in the background if I can end up getting some people to share some footage with me, but they're long-range rifles that are a bit weaker from the feedback that I've gathered, and this also includes a semi-auto and a burst from what I've heard. So it's an interesting cutback, which may open the game up for more rifles in different areas, since we also need to realize that this is an early build of the game, so we won't have near as much shown now as what's actually at launch. So this may open up some more weapons, which may actually make it the most we've ever seen, which is kind of fascinating. Another thing regarding the creative class system itself is that shotguns are no longer their own primary category. You may have noticed that whenever we've rattled off those lists that were available as the primaries, shotguns weren't in there. Instead, they're now secondaries. If you remember Modern Warfare 2, this is the first time since then that shotguns are going to be a secondary. You can have a rifle, an SMG, and still bust out a shotgun without having to use overkill. But the counter and the caveat to this is that they're seemingly pretty weak. I used them a little bit. I did manage to get a double kill on a hard point to clear that out a little bit, but they were already stunned and a little bit weak probably, so that's something that I can't really give that all that much credit. But you'll see in some footage that whenever I end up trying to shoot some people with it, well, there's like 3-4 hit markers with it, so they're relatively weak. I wouldn't necessarily worry all that much just yet about these. Obviously, we're still are very limited in the gameplay that we have, but that's something that shotguns were moved as into the secondary categories. Now, the final thing that I really want to talk about the creative class system with is that there's actually attachment tiers. You may have remembered actually in the reveal itself, they talked about each weapon having unique properties in the sense of how attachments will work along with it, but alongside that, not only are there unique attachments for each individual weapon and not across a classification of a weapon, you now have tiers to these different attachments as well. We saw in some cases up to 2 tiers. There might be more upon the beta or the full launch. We don't know just yet, but for example, there are things like the stabilizer attachment, which reduces sway when aiming down sight, and then also the stabilizer 2 second tier would allow you to hold your breath longer on that. Then you'd have the high caliber attachment, which would increase damage to the lower torso, and then high caliber 2 would increase damage to the legs. So you can see there's kind of just like a of building block that goes on to it. Now, I personally didn't play around with all these that much to the sense that maybe Stabilizer 2 or High Caliber 2 takes 2 pick 10 slots, but that's something that is interesting nonetheless, that there is that additional option for it. Another big one though, jumping back into the gameplay itself, is that whenever you go in and you spawn, because there are the ways of the specialists themselves having some rather interesting abilities, we'll put it that way. One is the ability for a sort of tack insert type of deal. But with that, you now have a very Battlefield-like sequence in which you can actually select your spawn. It's gonna take you to an overview of the maps, regardless if that tack is on the playing field at all, or if it's not. It's gonna take you back there that you're going to have to confirm just a regular respawn as is, but you'll notice that at some points you might be able to spawn up compared to where you may be spawning back. So that'll be interesting to see how much that plays out and how much it adjusts the meta of the game itself, but we'll see in time no less. Another thing with gameplay itself is that domination now is a little bit different. Now, obviously, yes, you still get the score for capping and everything like that, but the nice part with this is that if you end up capping at any point in time, you end up getting credit for that so long as it ends up being reverted back. So if you're, say, capturing the base and you put in 20% on it, and then you get killed off, but your teammate finishes the cap, you'll get credit for that capture of the domination flag. So that's a nice way that it encourages a little bit more of a strategic and a little bit more objective-oriented play, but also, if you end up dying off, it's not the end of the world. It's something that you can still go forward, and that counts towards your next life streaks as well, so that's always a nice thing too. Another big thing in-game that you might notice deals with the minimap, because this new Fog of War technology really is something that kind of suppresses your visibility on the minimap itself. Previously, you'd be able to see a lot of stuff. Obviously, you'll still see people if they fire their weapons and don't have a suppressor or a muzzle flash on it, but you now have a much more constricted view of the minimap itself, which you might notice in the gameplay we've put up on the channel already. That might be a little bit different. So with that, again, you're gonna have to kind of adjust accordingly. I would imagine that there is some sort of full launch version of the game that includes a perk that does have something that kind of stabilizes this out, very similar to how we've had minimap perks in the past in recent games. That's something that I would expect very similar, but I guess we'll see again in time. I keep coming back to that, but again, we're still playing on such an early build that we don't have all the answers. And talking HUD in general, there's a lot of different changes here with this one, because if you take a look at just the regular gameplay HUD itself, you have score on the side underneath the minimap instead of on the bottom left like we've seen previously in various numbers of games throughout the years. Health is now visibly shown via numerical statistics, so you can see exactly how weak you are, which again is kind of needed whenever you end up taking into account that you have to manually regen your health, but that's something that is visible there that's never been present as well. Then we also have the ammo in magazines and the extra mag showcase next to a weapon icon in the lower right, so it's a little bit more of a precise way to track everything that you have in terms of your weapon ammo, which I like quite a bit. After that, we have play of the game. That actually returns from Call of Duty World War II, but it's done a little bit differently. Obviously, it's still kind of the same sort of thing where the most impressive play of that round or that game gets showcased, but before that, you actually have a sort of in-game rendered cinematic that takes your character in that scenario that you were just in and gives it a sort of third-person cinematic transition into first person, which I think is actually really cool. I liked this addition. It was something that I caught on to immediately, but realistically, at the end of the day, it's not really anything that's majorly changing the gameplay itself, but it's something that is just, wow, that's some cool attention to detail, or that's some cool additions to the gameplay that really is more so aesthetic, but still very nice. A huge thing you guys will probably notice right off the bat as well, and you may have already from the gameplay we put up, is that games right now are 5v5. Now, as it stands right now, it's really interesting to see if this will expand at all, but 5v5 seems to be the standard for Black Ops 4, meanwhile 6v6 has been for as long as we can ever remember. And of course, we have ground war in some games as well, so that's something that makes it even more. Whether or not we see ground war within Black Ops 4, I guess we'll see, and we don't have any information on that just yet, but as it stands, at the moment, 5v5 is the standard that you can look forward to in Black Ops 4. After that, we end up talking about maps in general, because we've seen varied size of maps in Call of Duty over the years. We've seen things as major as Stonehaven and Ghosts. We've seen things as small as Shipment in multiple games, but we end up seeing in Black Ops 4 very, very small maps. And that's something that kind of makes up for the 5v5 gameplay, because it is still very action-packed. Everybody's still funneled into those middle centers of the map, and everything still goes down as crazy as it would in 6v6. So in terms of that change, I'm actually relatively okay with it. I think that if we keep the map small, it definitely makes up for that lack of 6v6 gameplay, or maybe 9v9 if you want to put it in the sense of ground war. So that's something you can as as well look forward to. But the final change that really I want to let you guys know about within this, out of the many that we've talked about already, is one that's not necessarily as major as the others, but it is one that I actually can't show you because it's menu footage. But if you end up taking a look at how you would navigate the menus, right now it is a very similar build to that of how Destiny would be. You have that sort of scrolling icon that goes over it. It's not just a simple scroll through menus and click on each individual thing. You have to click and drag almost as if it's like a mouse cursor, but once again, so in the sense of Destiny and how that design is. So think about that, and then that's where you're at with that. So that's something we don't know if that'll change either. But regardless, that's going to round out some of our changes here with this one. Again, absolutely crazy amounts of stuff that we have to talk about with World War II, but I want to let you guys know about some of this stuff because to me it's kind of fascinating to see where we come from and the progression of the franchise over the years, but some of this stuff is honestly very worrisome to some people. So that said, I want to let you guys know that at the very moment, I still personally don't even think that I can make accurate judgments of the game, and it's something that I'm still waiting to play a little bit more to get maybe a little bit more of an accurate depiction of how I want to explain the game or give my own thoughts and opinions on it. But it is something that I think will grow on you. It does take a little bit of time to get used to, but I think that you guys will enjoy if you were to have hands-on experience. So that said, make sure you guys stick it here up on the channel. We're gonna have a lot of stuff regarding Black Ops 4. Again, we have so much content coming, so make sure you stick it right here up on the channel if you guys are interested. Love to hear your thoughts and feedback though down there in the comment section down below. Is there anything in particular out of this video that you're like, man, I wish that wasn't changed, or I'm glad that's changed? Whatever it may be, feel free to let me know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding Black Ops 4. If you guys want to follow me over on Twitter as well, that's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on Twitter. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, link is down there in the description below. And finally, if you guys want to follow me over on Instagram as well, trying to get more active over there, so that link is also in the description below. But all that said and out of the way, hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. Take care and peace.